Good evening, everyone. Good evening. How are you doing this evening or morning or afternoon, depending on where you are tuning in from? It's your host, Danny Dhaiphong. It is good to be with you for another live stream. You know what to do before we begin. Be sure, please, to hit the like button, hit the thumbs up button, because that is how you boost the stream in YouTube's very unfriendly and very nefarious algorithm. And I have more on that at the end of the program. And be sure also to hit that subscribe button if you are new to this channel. It is very much appreciated that you remain here. And you also hit that notifications bell after you hit the subscribe button, because that is how you may or may not get notified by YouTube. But before I begin, also, this is a wonderful chance for you also as I prepare to discuss what we have in store for you tonight, to go to the video description and find all the ways you can support this channel, from Patreon, which is the best place. There's also Substack. There's also Buy Me a Coffee and PayPal as one-time options. You can be a YouTube member, which has been a growing and great and wonderful community that regularly attends these streams. All of those are possible options to support this work. But with that, all that said, everyone, I'm just going to give a rundown of what we got in store for you on this Thursday evening, at least in the northeast of the world, or I should say the Western Hemisphere. So we have a lot going on. Okay, I'm going to talk about the World Economic Forum, in particular, just the embarrassment that was Zelensky, that was the whole Ukraine project during this very controversial annual event. Of course, it's shrouded in hot debates, and I will give you my take on just what the World Economic Forum is actually all about. But we will center in on Zelensky's embarrassing moments. I mean, and it's only gotten worse since he went to the World Economic Forum and made a complete fool of himself. But that is the state of the Ukraine conflict at this moment. And I will be getting into how the World Economic Forum played into this. Then I'm going to talk a bit more of an evergreen story. I'm going to talk about Vladimir Putin and how Vladimir Putin has won incredibly big in this moment. How we can look at Vladimir Putin in this moment as a leader that is a real byproduct of the historical moment. And I will get into how he has exactly won big time in this moment in history, in this world historic shift in global politics that we are witnessing. And at the end, if there's time, I may have an ability to cover what's going on in the Middle East, but I cannot lie. What's happening in the Middle East is quite complex and does take a lot of sifting that I just did not have time to get through. So if there is time at the end, I will cover that. But it's most likely that what I will be covering is this whole China collapse theory. It's gone absolutely off the wall in recent weeks. And China's economic numbers are in, and they are nowhere near anything that you could consider collapse. And I'm going to talk about why. I'm going to compare how the Western mainstream media has covered this versus how China has covered it. And then I'm also going to discuss how there is a real trend to, while our eyes are diverted right now toward the Middle East, toward West Asia, toward Ukraine, there's a real effort to escalate with China at the moment and use the most pathetic of astroturfed pawns that the United States and the collective West can find to do that. But that is what we have in store at the end. So we have a lot of topics to get through, and we should get started. We have 676 people watching on YouTube. We have, I did not go live on Rockfin. Sorry, Rockfin community. We are now live. We have a few people on Rockfin. We have 79 on Rumble. Be sure to follow me on Rumble. That link is in the video description. You can find me at Danny Dhaiphong on Rumble, and you can follow me there. Be sure you're doing so. And at the end of the stream, I will be sure to share that link. Welcome to the Rumble community. I just want to say hello to all of the great moderators tonight. Let's see if I can find all of you. We have Desert Mantis, we have Ware Pilgrim, we have Connie, we have, who else do we have? Uh, well, that's quite a few. So we have 3 moderators already in the chat. Is there anyone else? I don't believe so. So thank you so much. Thanks for everyone also in the chat as well. Your attendance here is very much appreciated. So we should get started with the first story. How is it going to go? How it's going to go tonight is I'm going to move through the first story and then close. So I'm having some issues with RAM and StreamYard, I think. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cover the first story, close out of it. It may take a little bit of time in between, then to open up the next set, but not too long at all. This work is all produced by myself, so please do give support in the video description so that this work can continue to grow. So let's get started. All right. This year's annual World Economic Forum convening was a Davos disaster, to put it lightly. Now, the World Economic Forum is not a popular venture. The vast majority of the planet at this point understands the World Economic Forum to be merely a convening of the elite to give the virtue signal to the world public that they are, in fact, legitimate rulers. They come together, the richest people in the world come together, the biggest warmongers in the world, a hodgepodge, especially of the collective West, all come together to discuss what they believe are the most important themes, topics, and issues of the day. The World Economic Forum has come under heavy fire for many reasons, not least its commentary on the pandemic, but especially of late of being an engine of the U.S. foreign policy establishment, and in particular, the American empire and the collective West, which so slavishly, so slovenly does the bidding of the U.S. empire. And it was no different this time around. But the spotlight, or at least the dim spotlight, was on Vladimir Zelensky. Vladimir Zelensky came to this year's World Economic Forum not with hope, not with encouragement and enthusiasm, and not with the same bluster that has characterized Zelensky's visits in prior meetings held by the masters of war. This time around, Vladimir Zelensky was singing a slightly different tune, and I want to put an emphasis on slightly. So Zelensky at the World Economic Forum calls for peace, not more weapons, in Davos. This is from the New York Times. In a speech in Switzerland, the Ukrainian president asked for more sanctions on Moscow, but he did not appeal for weaponry for new offenses. I wonder why. Could it be that there is going to be no new offensives? They're seemingly on the defense in a permanent way. So the New York Times said, with fighting still raging in Ukraine in a front line that has barely shifted in more than a year, the country's president, Vladimir Zelensky, headed Tuesday to the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland, amid a swirl of diplomatic discussions about possible peace talks. Mr. Zelensky, dressed in olive green pants and a black crew neck sweater, yes, he went to the World Economic Forum looking like this again. So he was in that garb, and he was met with applause when he walked on stage with a room packed with hundreds of people at the forum, a high-profile gathering of business and financial elites. In his speech, he promoted a Ukrainian peace plan and called for stiffer sanctions on Russia. But in contrast with his comments to the forum last year, Zelensky made no direct appeals for weaponry for new offenses on the battlefield. He said, quote, "We need you in Ukraine to build, to reconstruct, to restore lives," he told the audience of investors. "Each of you can be more successful with Ukraine." Zelensky highlighted his country's plan to end the war, an initiative called the Peace Formula, which has gained the backing of dozens of countries, but those don't include Russia, and Moscow has rejected its terms. Oh, I wonder why. Could it be that actually Russia isn't even invited to be part of the negotiations, and that the demands on Russia are completely and wholly out of the question with regard to the actual situation on the battlefield? Oh, it could be something like that. It could have something to do with that. Russia signaled through informal envoys that Vladimir Putin is now open to ceasefire talks, but Ukrainian officials have said they will reject any temporary truce that comes separate from a broader settlement, lest Russia merely use the pause to regroup and attack again. Pure projection from the New York Times, since this is exactly what happened during the Minsk Accords not a decade ago. Russia, Mr. Zelensky said, has become an agent of chaos in the world, sowing instability in African nations, Syria, and Ukraine through military interventions that attempt at negotiations have failed to slow. A ceasefire in the long-running war in Ukraine did not stop the full-scale invasion of 2022, he said. Well, that's because of his masters. That's because of Zelensky's masters. So this is, again, while, and I want to say, he was not begging for weapons, he was indeed repeating what, of course, those at this event wanted to hear. They wanted to hear Putin is an evil man, Putin is bad, and Zelensky had to be basically the standard bearer of this message and promote a plan which calls for full Russian withdrawal from all territory, including Crimea. Ipso facto, this is a ridiculous plan. They were wasting all of their time, but it wasn't all wasted time here, because while Zelensky was changing his tune to a certain degree, it is quite clear who Zelensky was actually serving at Davos. Jamie Dimon tells Zelensky, God bless you, in Davos's face-to-face. Ukrainian leader met with CEOs and pushing for renewed funding. Kiev reached out as global aid held up by infighting. So here he is, shaking hands with Jamie Dimon, one of the chief swindlers and plunderers of the entire planet, the well-known JP Morgan chief. He also met with Blackstone Inc. Steve Schwartzman and Bridgewater founder Ray Diallo on that morning in Davos. On Tuesday, his mission: replenish the state coffers and divert attention back to a conflict at Europe's doors. Dimon introduced himself to Zelensky. I'm Jamie Dimon from JP Morgan Chase. God bless you. So big business leaders obviously have their eyes set on Ukraine. The richest, most oligarchic factions and elites that this planet has to offer have very cheery and very warm regard for Mr. Zelensky, and that's because Zelensky is their pawn. And so Zelensky's hope was that he could go to Davos and he could essentially scratch their backs, and then they would be the ones putting pressure on who they control, which is the politicians in Washington. It's the politicians in Europe, that they control them. So that will then lead to what Zelensky wants, which is a lot more money for Ukraine so that the war can continue in a protracted manner. So while the New York Times was saying that Zelensky was changing his tune to a certain degree, it was the Associated Press which said something a little different. They said Zelensky lashes out at Putin and presses allies to boost Ukraine's fight. So at the World Economic Forum annual meeting in Davos, Vladimir Zelensky came out swinging, urging political and business leaders facing war fatigue in the West to enforce sanctions, help rebuild his country, and advance the peace process. See, this is the exact same message from the New York Times with a different spin. Came out swinging rather than, as the New York Times put it, he came out with a lot less enthusiasm and a lot fewer demands than he had in the past. He's trying to keep his country, Zelensky is, to keep his country's long and largely stalemated defense against Russia on the minds of political leaders, as Israel's war with Hamas, which passed the 100-day mark this week, siphons off much of the world's attention and has sparked concerns about wider conflict in the Middle East. He sought to center Ukraine as a pillar in the defense of democracies. Anyone thinks this is only about us, this is only about Ukraine, are fundamentally mistaken. Putin embodies war, he said, lashing out the Kremlin leader for leveling cities and imposing the terrifying feeling that the war may never end. He also offered criticism for a world that told him not to worsen tensions ahead of Russia's full-scale invasion of 2022. After February 24th, nothing harmed our coalition more than this concept. Every "don't escalate" to us sounded like "you will prevail, Putin." So, I mean, this is classic Zelensky. Zelensky cannot help but essentially do this is embarrassing. And I'm going to show you it gets even worse from here. But he met with Secretary of State Antony Blinken and National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan, and who said that Washington is determined to keep supporting Ukraine and working very closely with Congress to do that. But guess what? Zelensky, Blinken, and Sullivan, you haven't gotten what you wanted, and it's likely never to come because Ukraine at this point is a doomed project. It is doomed to fail. But Zelensky, on the one hand, wasn't begging his masters for weapons, and on the other, he was lashing out in an entirely different way, a way that we've seen before. But I don't believe at this forum we have gotten the attention on this that it deserves. So, the World Economic Forum is usually focused on Klaus Schwab. It's usually focused on Bill Gates. It's usually focused on these basically the masterminds of capital, these huge capitalist, corporatist oligarchs who have so much wealth and so much influence over policy that their mere presence overshadows this behavior by Zelensky. This behavior by Zelensky was truly unhinged. And it just goes to show that no matter how rich you are, no matter how much control you think you have over your pawns and puppets, that these pawns and puppets often go off script, especially when your script has become absolutely illegitimate. It's become stale. It's become dry. Nobody wants to play the game of endless war in Ukraine anymore. So, here comes Zelensky first threatening Putin's grandchildren. He got personal in his speech at Davos's World Economic Forum. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky threatened Russian President Vladimir Putin's entire family with criminal trials and long prison sentences, he said in his speech at Davos on Tuesday, the World Economic Forum. Zelensky's address to the gathering of aspiring global leaders focused on asking for more weapons, money, and ammunition so he could continue to fight Russia. At one point, however, he made a reference to the Russian leaders' family. Putin will not, quote, rest in peace both in this world and the next, end quote, neither his children nor his grandchildren, end quote. So this essentially exposes the barbarity of Zelensky, and he was willing in front of all of his masters to expose himself in this way. This is not the kind of talk that even Antony Blinken, even the United States, even figures in the collective West would go so far down the path. Of course, Putin evil, but to go after family, to go after that so-called sacred institution that supposedly the collective West cherishes so much, that's another story. That is, while the United States did kill, for example, Muammar Gaddafi's children, that did happen. That happened before Gaddafi died in the 1980s, thanks to Ronald Reagan. Not all of his children, but he did kill several of his family members. Never would you hear, well, your grandchildren, your children will essentially rot in the down under. That is not really the etiquette of the empire, no matter how disgustingly cruel and unusual it can be. But not only this, Zelensky just showed over and over again how desperate this situation is for him and for Ukraine. So, Vladimir Zelensky, all the talk is always on the West at the World Economic Forum. What is the West doing? Are these elites doing? What is the United States' representatives, Europe's representatives, what are they doing? But when Zelensky did this made my jaw drop. Chinese PM is not on my level. Zelensky said he wants to meet with decision makers only. So at Davos on Wednesday, the next day at the World Economic Forum, he told reporters he actually sought not to meet with Chinese Premier Li Qiang at the World Economic Forum gathering in Davos. The remarks come amid reports that China's top officials shot down Zelensky's request for a meeting at the event. The premier is not the person calling the shots in China, Zelensky asserted, suggesting Li was not sufficiently high ranking to justify a meeting. So, context Politico initially reported that Li Qiang had wanted nothing to do with Zelensky. I mean, this is the theme for China throughout this conflict, wanting nothing to do with Zelensky. Why? Well, Zelensky's not viewed. Zelensky is, of course, viewed by the United Nations and by the world, right? It's so by international law as the legitimate government, but in practice, that's the rules. But in practice, China doesn't see Zelensky as a legitimate leader. China sees Zelensky like most of the world sees Zelensky as nothing but a pawn. So Zelensky said there is a Chinese premier, then our prime minister will meet with him. I would love to meet with the leader of China. As far as I know, China's Xi Jinping makes decisions in Ukraine, and in Ukraine, I make decisions. I don't need just any dialogue. I need important decisions from the leaders who make these decisions. Earlier that day, Politico reported that China has ruled out any diplomatic encounters with Ukraine and Davos altogether at Russia's behest. Beijing rejected Kiev's request for a meeting, visiting at some point during their mutual Swiss visits, said a senior U.S. anonymous official. Ukraine said that no meeting was ever scheduled to begin with, but here's the thing. Li Qiang is the second most powerful person in China's government. He is the leader of the state council. President Xi Jinping was never going to Davos. He wasn't going to meet with Vladimir Zelensky in Davos. That wasn't ever in the cards. So the fact that this media report, which who knows, who can verify its credibility, Politico and all of the Western mainstream media, let's be honest, reports a lot. They talk a lot. And they report on a lot of anonymous U.S. official information that cannot necessarily be verified. So whether it's true or whether it's not, the fact that Zelensky felt triggered enough to insult the second in line in China, Li Qiang, of the State Council, which is the executive body of the highest political organ in China, the National People's Congress. The State Council is what carries out policy decisions. The fact that Zelensky felt himself too big to meet with someone like Li Qiang exposes just how, not only how bankrupt he is, but how he has absolutely not just lost the plot, he's lost the war. And it was never really Zelensky's to win in the first place. But as with all things, karma is a you know what. And Bloomberg reported very shortly thereafter on January 18th, that would be this moment today. If you're watching it now, if you're watching the playback or clip, it is probably several days after. But Ukraine seeks to organize a call with China's Xi to push a leaders' summit. So all that bravado being too big for Li Qiang, now Ukraine is showing its cards and saying, well, actually, no, we actually really do value China. And not only that, but we're so desperate about the state of this conflict that we are going to beg China on our hands and knees to be a mediator in a conflict that, yes, Ukraine has lost. So Bloomberg says Ukraine's top diplomat said Kiev is seeking to organize a call with Chinese President Xi Jinping as the war-battered nation plans a leaders' summit to push forward its blueprint for peace. Foreign Minister Dmytro Kuleba, attending the World Economic Forum in Davos, said the government is pushing for a direct channel between Xi and Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky. There are things they can talk about, Kuleba said in an interview with Bloomberg Television on Thursday. Zelensky's peace formula is a way to restore lasting and just peace to Ukraine. So let's just be quite honest here. There's going to be zero conversation between Xi Jinping and Volodymyr Zelensky about this peace plan, because this peace plan completely contradicts the interests in security, the security interests, and really the respect and dignity of Russia and China would never talk and speak about any kind of plan that would hurt any of its allies, let alone its biggest in Russia. That is not how China does diplomacy. China will not be mediating, especially without Russia, a plan that absolutely has no benefit to Russia. China is not stupid. China is not stupid. Ukrainian leadership, that's another story. So China's called for negotiations toward peace, but maintained its ties with Russia, declining to condemn President Vladimir Putin of Russia and his invasion. She and Zelensky have spoken just once since the invasion began almost 2 years ago in April 2023, when she said talks are the only viable way out of the Ukraine crisis. So Zelensky said at the forum he plans for a high-level meeting in Switzerland later this year to move forward with Ukraine's peace initiative, which insists Russian forces withdraw completely from Ukrainian territory. Security officials of more than 80 nations met in Davos Sunday to discuss the blueprint, but the meeting ended with no clear path forward. So, Ukraine is coming on its hands and knees to China, as the collective West has from the very beginning of this conflict, to say, hey, can you please support, pretty please support this absolutely bankrupt peace plan that's a waste of time and can't be called any such thing. It can't be called a peace plan if it is calling for essentially a war on everything that Russia has gained, not just in this conflict, but politically, diplomatically, and militarily over the last decade. Absolutely not. Since the Maidan coup, Russia would never make any such concessions, and China would never waste its time on a peace plan that asks for concessions that are not viable. So Volodymyr Zelensky made a huge fool out of himself at this World Economic Forum meeting. And the World Economic Forum is usually filled with enthusiasm. It's usually filled with hubris, the hubris of the elites coming together to talk about absolutely how they have these grand plans to make the world better when in fact they're going to make our lives a lot worse. Their grand plans to get rid of everything, get rid of so-called property, institute full AI, address climate change, and all of these things. But this year, those issues were overshadowed, and even the Financial Times had to say it. They said geopolitical risks overshadow economic optimism in Davos. Discussions at the World Economic Forum focus on wars in Gaza and Ukraine and the prospect of another Trump presidency. So even the Financial Times is admitting that there are political headwinds going on, that Donald Trump's potential victory is going to cause big problems, that there's anxiety in the global economy. And here you have the United States only growing 2.1% in 2023. And they say that's optimistic because that's double the rate it was predicted a year earlier. So you have in instance after instance, they're saying this is enthusiastic. I'm pointing this out as hugely troubling. But you had Ukraine, you had Gaza, you had so many issues, the Red Sea crisis coming up. Essentially, what the Financial Times had said in this article in its report, that these geopolitical risks far outweigh whatever the elites have to say about anything else, because they have put themselves in essentially the quagmire of a century. It is historically unprecedented what is going on. You have NATO absolutely bogged down in Ukraine. You have the United States and Israel bogged down in West Asia on the Red Sea. You have the United States having to cool tensions with China in at least a rhetorical and an optical manner, while at the same time plotting and planning for a broader war with China that it knows it not only cannot win, that it can't even ignite right now, lest it finds itself tied up on 3 different fronts of major military conflict. So Zelensky's embarrassment at the World Economic Forum, the World Economic Forum itself was an embarrassment. It was a disaster. It offered no enthusiasm. It offered no hope. What it did was only solidify people's understanding, the vast majority of people's understanding of the World Economic Forum as an engine of the global elite. It's their engine to come together to assert their dominance and their power over the vast majority of people. And they are exposed in a major way when it comes to the quagmire of a century that they have put themselves in. And Zelensky, what better example? Clown show Zelensky, what Pepe Escobar calls the sweaty sweatshirt. What better example than he to demonstrate what state this empire, what state the World Economic Forum, what state the elite really is in? They are crumbling. They are in a state of chaos. And it's important to point that out because it's going to fall on us hard, but it's also going to fall on us to be responsible and step up to the plate and do our part to make sure that we get one more step closer to not only ending the war in Ukraine, not only calling for peace, not only getting a ceasefire in Gaza, but also to unseating these vile vipers that occupy not just the halls of Washington, not just the halls of the World Economic Forum, the boardrooms, and the arenas of power that dictate life as we know it. So, everybody, that was the first story. So, what I'm going to do now, thanks so much. We have about almost 2,000 people watching 1980. Keep hitting that like button because then we can get more and more people in here. I saw someone gifted members. That's really generous. I'm going to read out all of that at the end of this program. Your super chats and memberships, gift memberships, all that are very much appreciated. But I am going now to give me a minute. I'm going to get up the next story. We're going to talk about Vladimir Putin. This is something I was really looking forward to covering today. It does have to do with Davos, so we'll have still a Davos theme because we are jumping off from Davos. So keep hitting that like button, keep hitting that notifications bell, that good stuff. All right. As I get these stories ready. All right, here we go. Here we go. We're almost there. Here we go. All right, sorry about that. Sorry about that. We are about to get started again. All right, so hit that like button, hit that notifications bell, hit all that good stuff. Be sure to support this work on Patreon if you are able. That's the best place to support this work. That link is in the video description, I believe, of all the videos. So let's get started here. Where is it? Okay, sorry about that. Okay. In many ways, forums like the World Economic Forum annual gathering only show not the power and the control and the dominance that the global elite has over the rest of the world, but in many ways, it shows how this global elite is indeed fracturing. And politically, this couldn't be any more clear. And the big winner in all of this is, you bet, you guessed it, Vladimir Putin. Vladimir Putin has been the biggest winner, not just in this year's World Economic Forum, but he's been really the winner of the year over 2023 and now into 2024. And it's important to understand Vladimir Putin's true intentions because there's a lot of misunderstanding about Vladimir Putin. Vladimir Putin is demonized in the collective West. He is viewed as the chief of all monsters, the commander in chief of the monstrous authoritarians that supposedly rule over our planet. But nothing could be further from the truth. And so at Davos, this message was, of course, promoted over and over again at the World Economic Forum. Here, Politico reported David Cameron, the new, or should I say, we all know David Cameron for his long career of warmongering on Downing Street. But David Cameron is now the UK Foreign Secretary, and he told Politico it feels like the 1930s again, and evil Putin can't win in Ukraine. So here's what he had to say about Putin. He said that the war in Ukraine remains Cameron's quote unquote absolute number one priority, he said in an interview with Politico's Power Play podcast. This is the challenge of our generation. This is like being a foreign minister or a leader in Europe in the 1930s. We, sorry about that. We have got to not appease Putin. We've got to stand up to the evil that his invasion represents. And then hear this. He said, one thing we can't do is demonstrate during the course of this year that Putin isn't winning. So David Cameron said one thing we can do is demonstrate during the course of this year that Putin isn't winning is something they can do. Essentially, when you frame something like this, all right? So this is an advice to Mr. Cameron, our geniuses in the political establishment in the collective West. When you have to frame something in a negative like this, you are essentially exposing the fact that the positive exists. So one thing that the UK can do this year, says David Cameron, is basically they can show that Putin isn't winning, which means Putin is winning. And so they, of course, have to paint him as a fascist, as a Nazi, when in fact it's been the UK that supports Nazis. It's the UK that is now the chief supporter of, you betcha, Ukraine. So as the United States has been tied up with its congressional gridlock over Ukraine funding, which has led to Ukraine running out of everything it had because the counteroffensive was such a deep failure. And of course, that signals what? Yes, a Putin victory. Ukraine and Britain have announced a security agreement during the visit by PM Sunak. So during his visit, Prime Minister Rishi Sunak visited Kiev in recent weeks and confirmed 2.5 billion pounds or 3.2 billion US dollars in new aid for Ukraine in the financial year. This happened just before the World Economic Forum. So this new security agreement was announced during Rishi Sunak's visit, and it represents an increase in military funding for the war-racked country during a visit to Kiev. Britain, one of Ukraine's closest allies during the Russian invasion, will increase its support next year to 2.5 billion pounds, an increase of 200 million pounds on the previous 2 years. The funding would cover long-range missiles, air defense, artillery, ammunition, and maritime security. Our opponents around the world believe that we have neither the patience nor the resources for long wars. So waver now, we embolden not just Putin, but his allies in North Korea, Iran, and elsewhere. This is how the UK has been talking. They have been talking like they are rabid hawks, basically singing for the United States. And this is a theme. This has happened with regard to Yemen, too. Many have believed and have verified that the UK has been leading that disastrous operation on the Red Sea to try to open up the Bab el-Mandeb Strait. And it's been absolutely disastrous, of course. But now you have the UK, of course, trying to take the lead here. But with what? Essentially, even though there's all this bluster like from Zelensky, this is not a declaration. This is a reality that will come to fruition as a result of our cooperation, including security commitments from a major global power like the United Kingdom. If the UK and other countries had provided such levels of guarantees after 1991, there would be no Russian aggression at all. So the way that the collective West and the way that Zelensky talks to the collective West couldn't show any more how much Putin has actually been the winner here. And actually, when it comes to what happened at the World Economic Forum, how else could anyone conclude or make conclusions than that Vladimir Putin is the winner? But what has Vladimir Putin won? Because there's a lot of misconceptions about Vladimir Putin himself. Many people think in the collective West that Vladimir Putin's entire plan right now is to take over Ukraine, is to destroy Ukraine. Now, if you listen to David Cameron, you think Vladimir Putin is a Nazi, is a fascist who is looking to essentially wipe Ukraine off of the map. And nothing could be further from the truth. This is not what Vladimir Putin wants. Vladimir Putin wants something entirely different. And we're going to listen to Colonel Douglas McGregor, who you think would be a voice on the opposite side of the issue from mine, but he was recently on Alex from Reportify's channel, and I do highly encourage you to subscribe to Alex from Reportify Media and Travel, and you can listen to the full video there. But Colonel Douglas McGregor is going to talk about Vladimir Putin's intentions and what he is really all about. And I'll let you know exactly what I think about this, because it aligns a lot with how I view Vladimir Putin's leadership and his true intentions. Here we go.
I think Mr. Putin is close to the point of giving up on the possibility that anyone with moral courage will rise to the occasion in Europe and offer to cooperate and end the war. Because from the very beginning, it's hard for people to understand this in the West, but Mr. Putin has not been interested in killing large numbers of fellow Orthodox Slavs. He has never wanted that. He has never aspired to rule anyone in Western Ukraine, Poland, Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia, Romania, Bulgaria, anywhere. He wants to get back to normalcy. He wants to do business. There will be no Russian assault on Eastern Europe, but he's going to have to march to the Dnieper, and he's going to eventually take a hand in somehow or another restoring some measure of civility to Western Ukraine if he's left no choice, but he'd rather not. I don't know what we're going to do, because we're facing a looming bankruptcy. How we're going to finance anything in Western Ukraine is another question. But the bottom line is that's over. We've lost. When I say we, I'm talking about the fools in Washington who made all of these ridiculous assumptions about Russia, that Russia was weak, that its military was incapable, that it could not sustain itself. By the way, these are the things that we continue to say now about Israel's opponents. And my point is, if you actually care about the survival of the state of Israel, you have to recognize that the Middle East has actually changed over the last 50 years, and that states like Iran and Turkey are infinitely more powerful, capable, and potent than they've ever been before. And you cannot ignore hundreds of millions of Muslim Arabs and their rage. If you do, eventually this will explode in your face, and Israel will be lucky to survive. No one wants to go there. Everyone takes the position of that's impossible. And again, we have a habit in Washington of believing it's still 1991.
So that was Colonel Douglas McGregor on his impressions of Vladimir Putin. And, of course, he commented on other affairs like what's going on in the Middle East, what's going on in Gaza. But here we're focused on Vladimir Putin and his true intentions. And he said it correctly, that Vladimir Putin did not want to kill, did not want all of these dead bodies at the hands of Russian forces. This was not what he wanted. Actually, and I'm going to play you a video from Vladimir Putin himself. Russia, first of all, was very clear that it had the capabilities to go toe-to-toe with NATO's proxy. It made that very clear from the very beginning. That was all the scaremongering about, I feel like I'm Zelensky right now, all the scaremongering about Russia building up on the border. That was Russia showing that it had the capabilities to fight if it had to fight. And the United States and NATO, what did they do? They said, yeah, you need to fight because we are never going to respect your legitimate security interests here. We not only staged a coup, not only implanted a government hostile to you, not only backed and armed and funded and trained the most rabidly reactionary anti-Russian forces, many of them Nazis. Not only did we do this, but now we are never going to promise you that the unthinkable may or may not happen. We're never going to promise you that Ukraine will not join NATO. And Russia said, well, and Putin said, okay, well, then I guess we have to fight. And that is exactly what has happened. So Russia never wanted this all along. And the idea that Vladimir Putin is evil, that he's a Nazi, that he's a fascist is absolutely ridiculous. And David Cameron, the UK, and really the entire collective West, with the United States needing to be put in this picture, must be ashamed of themselves, because what they have done is they have actually boosted and benefited Putin's image. It's Vladimir Putin that looks like the strong one, and it's the United States and the collective West that look like the morons that they are. And you know what? Vladimir Putin called it as such in a recent media appearance. This is what he had to say about the Ukrainian leadership. He called them morons. This is on RT on Rumble. He called them morons because they had a peace agreement signed. Alexei Arestovich, one of Zelensky's former top aides, has said as much, that their agreement was signed. It was ready to go. And what did Ukraine do? Well, it listened to its masters in the West. So here we go. Oh, it's muted.
Negotiate. Having refused to negotiate, it were them who refused to negotiate. Let me remind you that everything was agreed upon in Istanbul. I am telling this to you, representatives of the municipal authorities, but all citizens of Russia.
So he's talking about Istanbul being the meeting place where peace talks occurred in March of 2023, with an agreement ready. 2023, what I'm saying, 2022, with an agreement ready in April of 2022 after the late March meeting. So here we go.
Of course, should know it. But you worked directly with them. We agreed on everything. Moreover, the head of the Ukrainian negotiating group even put his signature on it. There is a signature. We have the document. They just told us that we need to give some kind of sign that Russia really intends to resolve these issues peacefully. We need to move the troops away from Kyiv. We moved the troops. A day later, they threw all the agreements into the trash. Now they've said it publicly, including the head of that very negotiating group. And he, by the way, is the head of the ruling party in parliament in the Rada. He said, yes, we were ready, but we missed it because the then British Prime Minister, Mr. Johnson, came and told us not to implement these agreements. Morons, aren't they?
Yes, indeed. Morons. That's exactly the truth. They're morons. This was their doing. This is what they did. And Vladimir Putin, while Vladimir Putin wanted a peace agreement, it was him who benefited. He was the one who won. He was the one who was able to then get the historic opportunity. Not many leaders, not many world leaders get this opportunity to navigate a political storm, a military storm like the one that was put in front of his face, and navigate it in a way where you end up being victorious. There are times where in wars, everyone is a loser, even when you win. But in this case, he is a winner. And Aaron Mate of the Gray Zone wrote in his own Substack that Ukraine's top negotiator confirms US-UK sabotage peace deal with Russia. So this isn't just Putin's words. According to David Arachafmia, Russia was prepared to end the war if we agreed to neutrality and committed that we would not join NATO, but the US and the UK stood in the way. And so that was confirmed early in 2023. So Putin won. I mean, this is the theme here, is that Putin's intentions were always winning intentions, in the sense that the reality was Russia was not trying to destroy Ukraine. Russia has still been fighting the war with no intention of destroying Ukraine. And because it has had that as its goal, as its organizing principle, it has been able to navigate in a manner to lead itself in a position of victory rather than defeat. It had all it already had, and then it built all the capacity to fight a war like this, a war of attrition. And now we are seeing the results. The results are that it is the collective West that is crumbling. Their military edifice has crumbled. They don't have anything left for Ukraine. And now politically, they are disintegrating and coming apart. You have election after election coming up. Germany, France, the United States. There are political storms coming for the collective West because of the conflict in Ukraine. Not entirely, but in the main, Ukraine is going to be one of the most significant influencers, one of the most significant influences on the political outcomes of these elections coming up in the collective West. Vladimir Putin is going to go into the 2024 presidential election in Russia as not just the favorite, but the unanimous, undeniable favorite to win in 2024. Regardless of whatever you think of Russia's political system, and regardless of whatever you know about it, which most people know jack to nothing about it in the West, the fact is that even if Russia's political system were as corrupt as the United States is or those in the collective West, it still would mean that Vladimir Putin is the most influential political leader in Russia and is the most popular as well. So, all of that is to say is that Vladimir Putin ended up in this position to ascend as a leader of world historic importance because of a conflict that the United States and NATO created. Imagine that. So, there is now, of course, this reality brewing that the Ukraine conflict is not only in tatters, right? Because NATO is issuing really downbeat updates on Ukraine. You have Jens Stoltenberg saying it's extremely difficult a situation and that Kiev's field summer counteroffensive is a big reason why. And so at Davos, what did Stoltenberg said? He said the situation is extremely difficult. The Russians are now pushing on many front lines. And of course, the big offensive that the Ukrainians launched in the summer did not give the results we hoped for. Russia is pushing hard, and this is serious, and we should never underestimate Russia. So he insisted that there's also cause for optimism because Kiev was not taken within a few days, which most Westerners believed. He described it as a big win for Ukraine that it has survived as a sovereign, independent nation. So essentially, we're at the point where Ukraine is getting pity points. You survived. You didn't fall in a couple of days. We might have armed you to the teeth so you wouldn't fall in a couple of days, but you survived. And that is victory in and of itself. And now you can go down in defeat with absolutely zero dignity, but we can wash our hands of you. That is what Jens Stoltenberg is essentially saying. But in there, he's also saying Russia won, Putin won. This conflict is over. And a mark of defeat in the realm of geopolitics is not military necessarily. It's not in the military realm necessarily. It's in the economic realm. Because what is Davos, right? What is military conflict but an expression of political power through violence, through violent state power? That is what military conflict really is. But if it isn't about the economics, if there isn't an economic incentive behind it, then why do it at all? For just crass power and prestige? No. That's not enough. Most people who are craving power, most who want endless riches like those who represent the chiefs of Davos. Klaus Schwab is nothing but a puppet. We're talking about the Blackstone, the BlackRock group. We're talking about JP Morgan. We're talking about the big banks. These forces, mind you, they are very interested in military conflict to get rich. And so if that's the rubric that we're going from, Vladimir Putin has done incredibly well because now Russia, not Putin himself, which is a big difference. Remember, in the collective West, what happens during wars? Well, the stock prices, the profits of the major weapons contractors, the big banks, they shoot way up because their investments are seeing a massive over their profits are going through the roof. Their bottom lines are just getting larger and larger. But for Russia, it's been the entire economy that has benefited, so much so that Russia is Europe's first economy, despite thousands of sanctions. Literally, Putin said we have left all of Europe behind in terms of purchasing power parity, but as far as per capita indicator, we need to work harder. So, and that is fair because let's be honest, Russia has had to come from one of the most disastrous positions in the world, and that is the fall of the Soviet Union. So here, though, it seems, said Putin, that we are being strangled and pressured from every side, but still we are the largest economy in Europe. We left Germany behind and climbed to fifth in the world in terms of GDP at purchasing power parity with China, the US, India, Japan, and now Russia. We are number one in Europe, the president said, and he said this at a meeting with business leaders in the Far East. So Vladimir Putin's intentions are pretty clear. You know, Scott Ritter, friend of the show, says all the time that if you want to understand Vladimir Putin, you can hear what he says. You can read what he writes. You can listen to his speeches. And then you can take into account the actions of his leadership and that of the Russian government. And what we can really see from what's happened with Ukraine and what's happened in Project Ukraine is that Vladimir Putin wasn't in this to be some kind of new, a monarchist, this new imperialist that he has been often characterized as. He wasn't trying to take over all of Ukraine and make it into some kind of protectorate of Russia. He wasn't trying to absorb into all of Russia. In fact, all of the territories that have been absorbed into Russia have been absorbed because not just of their ethnic makeup, but because the vast majority of them wanted this to happen. They wanted the Federation of Russia, the Russian Federation, to be their rightful government, central government, because they had been terrorized under Ukraine, because their self-determination, right? If we look at many nations around the world, when there is ethnic conflict and self-determination isn't respected, that's usually when countries are easily balkanized, easily divided. But in the case of Ukraine, people of Donetsk, people of Lugansk, people of Zaporozhye, they did not want to be in that position anymore. They didn't want to be shelled. They didn't want to be destroyed. They wanted what Crimea got, which was the ability to develop along Russia's terms rather than Ukraine's, because Ukraine wasn't offering any development. They were just offering shells and artillery to their infrastructure, to their bodies, to their families, in essentially a massacre that could be called a genocide. If we call what's happening in Gaza a genocide, we could have called what was going on with Ukraine targeting ethnic Russians as grounds for possible genocide, given that there was so much intent among the neo-Nazis and among the fascists, among even those who don't consider themselves that, the anti-Russian rhetoric coming out, that could be considered a genocide. But I digress. The point here is that Vladimir Putin is the big winner in all of this. Davos meets, they come together. The World Economic Forum comes together there with all the biggest elites that are supposed to be standing tall against Putin, strangling him economically, destroying Russia from the inside out, giving Ukraine what it needs to defeat Russia. And all of it has failed. All of it has been a massive and total and utter failure. And Vladimir Putin has come out not just inspiration to so many around the world, and that is the truth. The truth is that Vladimir Putin and the Russian government has come out of this looking like heroes, in the sense that they have dealt maybe the biggest blow to NATO in its history. We have to be clear about that. So Russia and Vladimir Putin in particular has come out looking very heroic, has come out more popular on the world stage. The popularity has been solidified on the domestic stage, And economically, Russia is stronger than it has ever been, or at least it's stronger than it has ever been since the fall of the Soviet Union, meaning that there are brighter days for Vladimir Putin ahead. His intentions are quite clear. It is the collective West, it is NATO, it is the United States that we really have to be worried about, because their intentions are never clear. They never are clear about their intentions, except when it comes to Russia. And what are their intentions? Their intentions are war, and that is not going away. No matter how many bells ring, no matter how many white flags go up that show that there is nothing left and that there is no hope in this conflict, the United States, NATO, all of the vassals that have been brought along in the collective West to essentially participate in this catastrophe, they are not going to give up. And if it's not Ukraine, it's going to be somewhere else. Is it Serbia? Is it a color revolution there? Is it Kosovo sending missiles there? Or is it, for the meantime, staying focused on the Middle East and West Asia because pet project Israel needs all the help it can get? Well, that is for the future to determine. But the truth is that Vladimir Putin is the big winner at Davos, the World Economic Forum. He really has been the big winner in the entirety of Project Ukraine, which launched not in 2022, not even in 2014, but really since the formation of NATO after the Second World War, in which the project, the mission to destroy Russia reached a fever pitch. To destroy the Soviet Union, to destroy Russia reached a fever pitch. And Vladimir Putin is coming out as a byproduct, a victorious byproduct of a historical moment where Russia comes out on top and NATO and the US and the hegemonists end up essentially wallowing in defeat. All right, everybody. Let's get to one last story, or maybe two, if I got it in me. All right. Let's see. I'm going to just exit out these. Okay. Keep hitting that like button. Keep hitting that notifications bell. The like button is the most helpful because it is that like button which gets more and more people into the stream. We have over 2,000 viewers on YouTube. We have over 13 people watching on Rockfin. Hello, Rockfin community. And we have 144 people watching on Rumble. Hello, Rumble. Thank you so much. So now let's see. Okay. Hmm. All right. All right, guys. I have to do it, even though this isn't my specialty, but it's got to be covered, okay? It's got to be covered. We're going to talk a little Middle East, okay? And I'm going to talk about the China factor here in what's going on in the Middle East. All right? It's important. It's really important that we talk about the China factor here, because there's not a lot of talk about why things have gone the way they have between Iran and Pakistan. And I'm going to give you some hypotheses as to why, although a single segment will never be able to cover the whole thing. I'm going to talk about the whole failure of the Middle East policy, all right, that the United States has endeavored here. Because it's a mess. It really is a mess. And it's important to see it for what it is. All right. Somebody actually gave a super chat. I think it was the Iranian Putin saying, "What are my thoughts on what's happening?" I'm going to give them now because I can't avoid this topic. And then I'll see if I have time for the China story. Even if I run through that one, both of these in about 20 minutes time each. How about that? All right. All right, let's get started. Still got about 2,000 people watching. Keep it here. While you're here, and before I start, go to the video description and consider becoming a member on Patreon. Consider becoming a YouTube member, a member on Substack, or donating to PayPal or buy me a coffee. Patreon is the best place to support. It's where you get the ability to suggest questions, the ability to suggest guests, and the ability to communicate and those kinds of things outside of streams. So, and also you get a free PDF copy of my book on American exceptionalism. So those are great ways to support me, but Patreon being the best, but there's all kinds of ways in the video description to do so. So let's get going on the Middle East, okay? Oh, we're also on Twitter, on X, by the way, but only about 14 people are watching there. But nonetheless, we are on X streaming. Here we go. All right, let's... Developments in the Middle East have reached a fever pitch. The regional war that was predicted to occur because of what Israel ended up engaging in launching, this massacre, what a lot of have called a genocide on Gaza, has truly and indeed has ignited a regional war, one that is now spiraling out of control. Reports are that U.S. bases are being attacked in Iraq by the Islamic resistance now. Those are the latest reports, and there will be hopefully more coming out on that later. But the big story has been the tit for tat that Iran and Pakistan has been engaged in, which has left some confused. And the confusion is warranted because in in the tit for tat, so initially it was Iran that launched what many have called a show of force to essentially all actors in the region that are acting on behest of what they would call the Zionist entity. Iran launched ballistic missiles at locations in Balochistan, which is located in Pakistan and borders Iran. Um, there were several members of targeted terrorist groups killed. And then Pakistan launched their own series of attacks. So here's Al Mayadeen. Their report on this is that Iran has condemned the Pakistani attack and demands answers. Iran's foreign ministry spokesperson condemns the Pakistani attack on Iran, requesting an explanation by the Pakistani government. They condemned the attack carried out by Pakistan on the country's Sistan and Balochistan province earlier today, Nasser Kanani, the Iran foreign minister spokesperson, revealed. The charge d'affaires of the embassy in Pakistan and Tehran was summoned by the ministry to officially notify the protests and request an explanation from the Pakistani government, according to the senior Iranian diplomat. At 4:50 a.m. Thursday, several explosions were heard in the area of Saravan City. After investigations, we found that Pakistan had targeted one of Iran's border villages with a missile, said the Mehr news agency. The Pakistani military carried out overnight strikes in Iran, intelligence officials said earlier today, shortly after Tehran attacked positions of the Jaish al-Adil terrorist group in Pakistan. I can only confirm that we have conducted strikes against anti-Pakistan militant groups that were targeted inside Iran, a senior intelligence source not authorized to give information told AFP. Later, Pakistan's foreign ministry announced that the Pakistani military carried out strikes against what it called terrorist hideouts in Iran. In a statement, Islamabad said it respects Tehran's sovereignty, adding that the sole objective of today's act was in pursuit of Pakistan's own security and national interests. Iranian state media reported that 3 women and 4 children were killed in the attacks in the southeast of the country. Pakistan attacked an Iranian border village with missiles, the state television said, adding 3 women and 4 children were killed, all non-Iranian nationals. So here is the confusing thing about this for a lot of people, is that no Iranians were killed. Pakistanis were killed in the bombing that Iran took part in, the ballistic missile attack, but they were all considered to be of terrorist origin. And mind you, Pakistan has confirmed that as such. But I want to now go over, okay, because that's just the news report. But here is some deep context that we need to get into. The truth about Iran and Pakistan's events, because the news has been very difficult to follow here. So it says there's been extensive amounts of fake news and rumors circulating surrounding Iran's military actions and Pakistan's supposed retaliation. It is similar to the false rumors that surrounded the Iran-Taliban border accident 6 months ago, which they covered, this is from RTSG. Following that incident, it's a research collective, by the way. So just to let you know, relations continued as normal between Iran and Afghanistan, which two countries even boosted trade relations, signing new deals. It is likely the same will happen with current Iran-Pakistan events, despite social media fear-mongering. Anyhow, here are the events of timeline using previous examples. So here you go. You have 2017. You have Jaish ul Adil killing 27 Iranians in a border attack, and Iran conducted airstrikes in their hideouts in Pakistani territory, and air defenses did not interfere. Pakistan briefly recalls ambassador, only for relations to resume as normal. Then in 2022, 2023, sporadic Jaish Abdul attacks on Iran border coinciding with women life freedom riots. Then you have Victoria Nuland meeting with Pakistani officials. Okay, so that's never a good sign, and I'll comment on that in a bit. Jaish Abdul kills 11 Iranian border police, and Iran vows a response the next day. Then on Christmas of 2023, Israel kills the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps Brigade General Saeed Razi, and Iran vows a response. Early this year, ISIS claims responsibility for the Kerman bombings, which killed 103 civilians, and Iran vows a response. Then Iran strikes targets in Syria. Targets in Syria included ISIS and the Uyghur Turkestan Islamic Party, and there's a China connection, which I will get into in a bit. The TIP collaborates with ISIS as members of both groups wage terror attacks in Afghanistan against the Taliban government, as the Taliban cut all support to the TIP after making a deal with China. They also own territory in Syria, and one of the several groups continue to fight Assad. Thus, the logic of Iran hitting their known Syrian position. So this is what the tricky thing about territory is in West Asia, is that these groups operate all over. Okay, and many of these groups, mind you, are supported covertly or overtly by the collective West, by the United States, and by Israel. So, and by many of the Gulf monarchies, of course. So Iran strikes, and even Pakistan's government, okay, intelligence. Iran strikes targets in Erbil, Kurdish regional government of Iraq. Iran struck a safe house, which was used as a Mossad headquarters to organize Israeli operations in Iran and its vicinity. Among those killed was Pashwa Diazi, a powerful, well-connected oil tycoon with a net worth of over 1 billion USD, who helped facilitate the supply of oil to Israel, as well as helping finance several anti-Iran terror groups allied to Israel, such as PJAK and Komala. U.S. Patriot air defenses attempted but failed to intercept the missiles. On January 17, 2024, then you have the attacks in Pakistan. Pakistan's air defenses did not intercept Iranian missiles in its airspace, and then Pakistan strikes targets while Iran didn't intercept, meaning that these countries have capabilities to intercept these missiles, meaning that, what does it mean? Well, they're going to explain here. This is not the first time an incident like this happened, and nothing will come out of it. The fact that Pakistan did not intercept either time shows that they had advanced knowledge of the attacks and agreed to let it happen. This was implied by the statements given by Iranian FM Foreign Minister Amir Abdollahian in his communique with Pakistan's foreign minister. Pakistan's strike was possibly a show of force to appease outrage hyped up by Western-aligned social media. Given that Iran also did not intercept this strike, they likely had advanced knowledge of it with Pakistan. According to the Baluch Liberation Army, which is it's known as a terrorist group, there's debate about that, but let's just say it's gone through many iterations of being supported by the collective West and not being supported by the collective West. According to this Baluch Liberation Army, separatist groups' official telegram, Iran and Pakistan coordinated the operation against each other's groups. Reports of Iran and Pakistan striking each other's military personnel are fake and did not happen. So why it happened at all is due to the fact that several of these countries harbored groups that frequently attacked Iran, and as such, Iran responded to all of them at once. As admitted by Pakistan Prime Minister Imran Khan in past years following the 2017 Ul Adil attack, Pakistan must up its security for both its own benefit and the benefit of its neighbors, such as Iran. Jaish al-Adul has targeted Pakistan in some of its terror attacks as well. In many cases, these groups are often trained and armed by the U.S.'s CIA without knowledge of Pakistan's civilian government. Iran and Pakistan collaborating and eliminating terror hideouts is a step forward in relations for both countries. So that is the complexity here. It is incredibly complex what is going on. And now I'm going to show you how really, I think, prominent and reliable voices. Here's Sharmeen Narwani who said on the airstrikes between Iran and Pakistan, she is one of the editors, a columnist over at The Cradle. And I'm hoping to have her on the show one day because she's incredible. She said on the issue of airstrikes between Iran and Pakistan, both states targeted Baluch separatist militant groups that have long played the Iran-Pakistan border. In the case of Iran, killing thousands of border security guards over the years, which are funded and armed by foreign interests. This week's mutual airstrikes gave Tehran and Islamabad the justification to eliminate these armed extremist groups for each other without having to deal with the fallout from terrorist foreign funders and their local supporters. Now, keep in mind that both states are very close to China, a global power with strong anti-terror experience that actively seeks to increase its regional diplomatic profile. Iran and Pakistan will emerge from this with relations intact. Any blips will be ironed out by Beijing. Terrorism on their mutual border must be eliminated, so there may be further strikes. The losers in this are the foreign spoilers and their terrorist proxies. The winners eventually will be Iranian, Pakistani security, and stability. So that is complex because the rhetoric coming out that you see in the Western mainstream media is Pakistan angry about Iran's strike, Iran angry about Pakistan's strike. And indeed, there is the feigning, at least, of a kind of outrage about this because there needs to be an appeasement of the collective West, which, mind you, is, while commenting on Iran strikes as reckless, not Pakistan's, mind you, but while commenting on these strikes as reckless, the United States has shown that it does not want to get involved in this at all because it can't. And believe this, the United States has a hand in terrorism in Iran. If you've never heard of the MEK, look it up. It is a CIA-backed organization looking for regime change against Iran. This border between Pakistan and Iran has been rife with terrorism on each side of the border for many decades in order to conduct regime change in Iran and use Pakistan as an agent of regime change around the region. That has been a fact. That has been a reality. There's a reason why the Taliban got its start in Pakistan. There's a reason why the Mujahideen got their start there. There's a reason why the ISI in Pakistan has been well known for its activities, collaborating with the United States to build up groups like Al-Qaeda in order to use them as proxies for U.S. foreign policy interests. And both civilian governments in Iran and Pakistan have known this for many years. And so this is what likely is going on. So there is something bigger to this, though, that no one will talk about generally, but we can always depend on our friend of the show, Pepe Escobar, to do so. It is much bigger than just, and I'm going to show you why it's much bigger than just Iran and Pakistan tit for tat. This is of global significance. So Iran, Pakistan, no, they're not about to go to war, says Pepe Escobar. That's a rabid Atlanticist wet dream. They're both Shanghai Cooperation Organization members. Contiguous Sistan, Balochistan, and Iran and Balochistan and Pakistan are extremely complicated desert latitudes. There are separatists on both sides of the ultra-porous border from across the spectrum, Takfiris, anti-Ayatollahs, liberation armies, you name it. The CIA predictably has been playing divide and rule in Balochistan, Pakistani Balochistan for decades. What just happened is that both Iran and Islamabad, employing high-tech means, bombed people they consider terrorists, tit for tat. There may have been warnings, and they do not and will not strike each other's military bases. In my visits, so he's been to Iran and Pakistan over the years, he always requested a nearly impossible to obtain permit to visit Sistan, Balochistan, and Iran, and the extreme South Balochistan and Pakistan. He's been to North and Quetta. The requests were always politely refused by both sides. Too dangerous, and we cannot guarantee safety. Tehran and Islamabad will definitely need a resolute push to get rid of all quote-unquote terrorists, whatever their affiliations. Their existence is a dream CIA scenario. Perhaps the solution would come via a Shanghai Cooperation Organization mechanism. Russia, China would fully support it. That will impact the success of the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, CPEC, the key BRI project, the future gas pipeline, and the overall Iran-Pakistan gas pipeline, and the overall stability of the key node of Eurasian integration. So that is a huge factor here. Okay, this is a huge factor here. Is this fact that these two countries are both hugely important to global integration, to a new multipolar world. These pipelines are critical toward helping facilitate Russia and China's leadership in this multipolar world. And I'm going to show you now what Pepe Escobar had to say in 2022. It's important to note that Pakistan, this attempt to foment instability in Pakistan, has often been, and I will, and it's pretty easy to verify this, it's often been a tool to menace or disrupt, as Pepe Escobar says here. He wrote this in May 5th, 2022, Pakistani Sino economics. So a suicide bombing that happened this year targeting Chinese worker in Karachi comes a mere month after the US-backed ousting of PM Imran Khan, Pakistan's critical BRI hub in Beijing's vast Eurasian interconnectivity project, and it looks like CPEC is the ultimate target of the disruption. So this is a story. So essentially, I'll read some of this article, but there in April, there was a suicide bombing outside the University of Karachi's Confucius Institute, not Balochistan, and targeting Chinese teachers, not officials and installations. The suicide bomber was a woman, alias Brahmish, who detonated her vest just as a van carrying institute staff members approached the entrance. The attack was claimed by the Balochistan Liberation Army's Majid Brigade, which stressed that this was the first time they used a female suicide bomber. Shari Baloch was a school teacher with a zoology degree enrolled to pursue a master's degree, married to a dentist and a professor at a medical college in her hometown of Turbat. Her three brothers, blah, 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 include a government-funded, blah, blah, blah. So the Pakistani Foreign Office had to stress the obvious. This was a direct attack on the Pakistani-China friendship and ongoing cooperation, always qualified by both sides as iron brothers. Pakistan is an absolutely key node of the China's Belt and Road Initiative to connect the Eurasian landmass. It was no standard terrorist attack. Its reverberations are immense, not only in one of Pakistan's provinces in Southeast Asia regionally, but for the whole of Eurasia. It may be a harbinger of serious turbulence ahead. So here, it's important to note that in Balochistan, where these terrorists, where these armed groups that are undoubtedly backed by the United States, by the CIA, by the forces of the collective West, it is Balochistan, which is geostrategically as valuable as rare earth minerals, an immense desert position east of Iran, south of Afghanistan, and boasting 3 Arabian seaports, including Gwadar, practically at the mouth of the strategic Strait of Hormuz. Comprising nearly 48% of Pakistan's area, Balochistan is rich in uranium and copper, potentially very rich in oil, produces more than 1/3 of Pakistan's natural gas, and sparsely populated. The Baloch account for the majority of the population, followed by Pashtuns. Quetta, the large provincial capital, for years was considered Taliban central by the Pentagon. Gwadar, and the port built by China in the southwestern Balochistan coast of the Arabian Sea, directly across from Oman, is the absolute key node of the China-Pakistan economic corridor and doubles as the essential link in a never-ending pipeline saga. The Iran-Pakistan-India gas pipeline, previously known as the Peace Pipeline, with plans to cross from Iranian to Pakistani Balochistan, is absolute anathema to Washington since the George W. Bush era. So it remains an endless source of controversy. CPEC does, and there's so many links between Gwadar and Xinjiang for by the year 2030 being built. Most of the ambitious corridor deals with energy industrial zones and road and rail projects in different parts of the country. Would be an overall improvement of its lagging infrastructure. So essentially, what we've had. So we've had the National Endowment for Democracy very much present in Balochistan. WikiLeaks revealed in 2015 a big part of the Great Game, where there was a report that many Baloch nationalist leaders now come from urbanized districts of Kech, Panjor, and Gwadar. They are well connected to Gulf cities, Karachi, where tribal structures are non-existent. In fact, there is violence all over the province. The insurgency seems to concentrate many in these urbanized areas where it is likely that funding from the National Endowment for Democracy is coming from. So, Gwadar, the big port that is huge in the China-Pakistan economic corridor, is located in Balochistan. And that is why it is important for both Pakistan and Iran on both sides of the border to rid of these forces that are not forces that are some kind of liberation groups or indigenous. They are operating as proxies. Terrorism is probably the wrong word. They are proxies. And so it is very interesting to see that amid this regional catastrophe that the United States and Israel has ignited, we are seeing the axis of resistance, making moves like Iran did to demonstrate a show of force, but also to begin another kind of great game, which is to maybe take advantage of and use the opportunity to complete some really strategic objectives that are critical in the final analysis to ejecting foreign domination and influence in the region, to ejecting the United States and ejecting the Zionist entity from their powerful positions in this region. So it is important to keep all of this in mind, that Pakistan's Gwadar port is incredibly important to CPEC, which is made up of hundreds, if not thousands, of projects between China and Pakistan, that there is an India, Pakistan, Iran pipeline that is incredibly important here, and that this region is incredibly rich in resources. So it makes sense then that Iran would want, and that Pakistan also would want, to rid of terrorists, and that whatever differences they may have between them are obviously being worked out in a very complex way that is difficult to understand. But what isn't difficult to understand, at least from the standpoint of the collective West, is that the United States' Middle East policy, its West Asia policy, is in shambles and is crumbling. Not only is Iran and Pakistan, the United States have to keep their basically paws off of it. They have no ability to dictate anything that's going on here. And actually, they are probably quite scared that Iran was able to launch so many ballistic missiles in a long-range capacity as a show of force that indeed it has the ability to defend itself. But even Foreign Policy Magazine is talking about the U.S. Middle East policy has failed. The region is on fire and Washington is to blame. And I just wanted to show you this headline to then go into, because this is just a flurry of developments now. Here is, oh, hold on one second. Yes, there we go. Here is the latest development in the region. And this again has to do with Yemen and with Ansar Allah. So as the United States has absolutely no ability to dictate affairs with what's going on between Iran and Pakistan as they seek to maybe take care of matters that are heavily important to their own geostrategic interests in the region. Now you have, reported by the Times of Israel, no less, okay? Here it is, Times of Israel, saying that the Indian Navy, and this, I guess, is coming from Reuters as well, Indian Navy rescues crew of Houthi-struck U.S. ship off the coast of Yemen. The warship sent to assist U.S. Genco Picardy recovers 22 on board, including 9 Indian nationals. Fire on vessel extinguished. So what did Ansar Allah say? Now they're on the U.S. terrorist group list, I guess, again, which is not unironic at all. But what did they say on Sarala? They said, doesn't matter how many times you strike, because the United States has been conducting airstrikes on Yemen. You can bomb us, but we're not going to stop the blockade. And now they're showing, and now the Western mainstream media has to even report that the damage is actually, that there is damage that's happening. So the Indian Navy said on Thursday it had rescued the crews of a U.S.-owned vessel in the Gulf of Aden after an attack by Yemeni's Houthi movement as tensions in the region's sea lanes disrupted global trade. Following the attack on the U.S. Genco Picardy late on Wednesday, the U.S. military said its forces had conducted strikes on 14 Houthi missiles that presented an imminent threat to merchant vessels and U.S. Navy ships in the region. Attacks by the Iran-allied, as they always say, Houthi militia on ships in and around the Red Sea since November had slowed between Asia and Europe and alarmed major powers in an escalation of the war between Israel and Palestinian group Hamas in the Gaza Strip. The Houthis say they are acting in solidarity with Palestinians and threaten to target U.S. ships in response to American and British airstrikes on the group's position. So here you have the Houthis. They said their missiles had made a direct hit on it. Iran said it had to divert the warship deployed in the region to rescue the 22 on board, including 9 Indian nationals. The crew were all safe and the fire on board had been extinguished. But this is just showing again that the United States really has no capabilities. Their capabilities have been extinguished along with that fire on that cargo ship because this is going to keep happening. And now you're seeing, despite the rosy forecast of a lot of economists, economists have been saying, oh, well, if we can end this Red Sea row in a relatively short amount of time, then we can avoid the biggest consequences economically to what Ansar Allah is doing. Well, that's not happening. They're continuing. The stand that Yemen is taking is heroic. And even Joe Biden, here is Genocide Joe, even Genocide Joe had to admit, here he is on Sky News, that the United States is essentially bombing and nothing is happening, and they don't even have a purpose or a reason to do this beyond what they claim they're doing, which is trying to open up the Red Sea again, which is not working. So here's what Genocide Joe had to say.
Are the airstrikes in Yemen working? Well, when you say working, are they stopping the Houthis? No. Are they going to continue? Yes.
So there you go. Are the strikes stopping the Houthis? No. Are they going to continue? Yes. That's all you need to know about the United States' Middle East policy, its policy in West Asia at this moment. You had, and you might have seen, Antony Blinken at Davos, what he said, and I'll play it for you right now. What he said says everything. It essentially is an admission that the United States just lies. It's an empire of lies. And when it tells the truth, it looks exactly like what it is, which is a paper tiger with no legitimacy, which is essentially casting a blaze in the region of West Asia in order to try to save its pet project, Israel. But now that pet project is looking like it is not only out of control, but actually it has assumed control of the leash and is pulling the United States in any direction it wants to go in. Now the region is on fire. You have more intense fighting on the Lebanese border. You have this intense row, the solidarity blockade by Ansar Allah in Yemen. You have the Islamic resistance in Syria, in Iraq, hitting U.S. bases. You essentially have a powder keg that is getting closer and closer to blowing. And Joe Biden, all he has to say about it is the strikes aren't going to stop even if they're not working. And here you have Mr. Blinken. Here, this was from Judge Napolitano, his interview with Jeffrey Sachs. We won't go over the interview. It's only a couple minutes long, but we'll just listen to what Antony Blinken had to say here, okay? Because I think it's important. Here we go.
Among innocent men, women, and children breaks my
He's talking about Gaza. Innocent men, women, and children dying breaks his heart.
The question is, what is to be done? We've made judgments about how we thought we could be most effective in trying to shape this in ways to get more humanitarian assistance to people, to get better protections and minimize civilian casualties. And at every step along the way, not only have we impressed upon Israel its responsibilities to do that, we've seen some progress in areas where, absent our engagement, I don't believe it would have happened.
What is Blinken talking about first? There he is with Thomas Friedman, of course, the resident neocon at the New York Times. What a more vile figure to sit next to. I don't know who is worse, Blinken or Thomas Friedman. But Antony Blinken here is a Secretary of State, just lied through his teeth with absolutely no basis in fact. There's no basis in fact to what he said there. There's no basis in fact. Antony Blinken just went up on a major forum and said that the United States has made progress in the Middle East around Gaza, where if they had not been involved, then things would have been a lot worse. The United States is the principal backer of Israel. The United States is the reason why Israel can do what it does, and is honestly the principal reason that Israel does what it does. It is fueled by the United States' support. Without it, this gruesome, absolutely maniacal genocide could not be occurring right now. Mind you, this is all happening. He's saying this amid the fact that the United States, everything it has done in this region has basically set the region on fire. And this is a historical phenomenon. This is historical. This did not start with Blinken, but surely Antony Blinken and the Biden administration are putting the deadly and disastrous cherry on top of an absolutely despicable, chaotic, and failed policy in the region. Such a failure that the whole point of chaos, the whole point of destruction in this region was to siphon off the resources. The region at this moment is split between the axis of resistance, which is sovereign and won't allow the resources of the region to be just stolen, versus those countries that are completely and utterly dismembered, destroyed, and put into a vassal position that they can't even exploit their own resources so that the United States can exploit them. That's how poorly the United States has fared here. And it just goes to show, though, the hubris, the absolute vile arrogance that comes out of the mouths of these neocons, that they actually do believe what they say, and that they are willing to lie to our faces just to continue this failed policy. But they also tell the truth. And Biden is telling the truth when he says that the strikes are going to keep happening on Yemen, even if they don't work. Blinken will tell you a lie. We're making progress in the Middle East, even when the United States is the reason why the Middle East is aflame. This is the cycle of imperial rot and decline. It is the wheels are turning, the rubber is burning. There is nothing left here but the end game. And that end game is a massive war. Let's make no mistake about it. What Israel is doing will not be allowed. This is escalating as we speak. That's why there are so many attacks on CENTCOM, the so-called Central Command of the United States in Iraq, in Syria. That's why fighting is intensifying between Hezbollah and Israel. That's why Yemen is doing what it is doing. And that's why we're going to see continued conflict, airstrikes, escalations in this region until the situation in Gaza is resolved, until people stop being massacred by U.S. and Israeli weapons, logistics, and troops. Because let's be honest, if it weren't for U.S. logistical personnel, Israel wouldn't even be able to do what it is doing now, even though it is not faring too well as we speak. So until that's resolved, until the United States packs up its bags like it did with Afghanistan and does that to the rest of the region, until it stops interfering in the affairs of countries in that region, we are going to see escalation. And that's only going to worsen in the days to come, in the weeks to come. But we can be confident now, unlike in prior periods, we can be confident, and I say this with confidence, that the day that the United States no longer holds a major influence in this region, is no longer dictating affairs in this region, they're coming. They're coming. What Ansar Allah is doing, what Iran is doing, what Syria is doing, what the resistance is doing everywhere, what Gaza is doing, what people there are doing, their resistance is showing that that day is coming. And the United States is very, very afraid, and they should be. All right, everybody. I did have a China story, but I don't think I'm going to be able to get to it today. I was going to talk about the economic growth, but I don't think I'm going to be able to get to it. Can I? No, I can't. I gotta. Um, give me a minute. Give me a minute, guys. Let me make my transition. As I think about this, I'm thinking. Let me see what I got here. All right, everybody. So, all right, man. All right. So, I think I'm going to end the content portion, I think. um with that said, I have a few things I want to discuss with you before I leave. Number 1, all right. Support this channel, and why do I ask that? Why do I ask you to support it financially and monetarily? Because I'm noticing a really negative trend here. Okay. So, before I go, I just want to show you something that's going on. And Joe OWS, one of the moderators, maybe can also send along some things. I wanted to let you know about a phenomenon that's very troubling that definitely is going to affect this channel. Um, and that phenomenon is that there are people, maybe bots, I don't know, that are actually stealing my work. And I'm not the only one. Judge Napolitano, I believe, U.S. Tour of Duty, which Scott Ritter co-hosts, they are also getting it too. I think other interviews, Dialogue Works, the channel, um, that so geopolitics channels for the most part. Uh, YouTube is allowing this to happen. I mean, I've been trying to report for copyright strikes, but what ends up happening is that they end up deleting the videos and they go to a different channel. So I'm going to show you something, okay? I'm going to show you what I've been doing. So here is me reporting 5 different videos, okay? 5 different videos here. And at first, they were from this channel here, Kuhn Painter, all right? And so that video was removed. They said it was resolved. I don't know if this person got a copyright strike, but now I've just made a report here, and I'm going to show you what I'm talking about. So I'm going to go to this channel, and I'll show you exactly what's been going on, okay? So give me a second. This has happened to me dozens and dozens of times. So here is literally my video, okay? Thus far, and some vessels have actually been captured. And then you also have a situation, I'll pull up the so that's my video being republished, ripped from YouTube, republished. It's being rewarded quite heavily. A lot of these videos are getting 100,000 views or more, and it's by another channel now. So I'm not sure if these are bots. They're going quite fast. They're everywhere, ripping content from my channel, republishing on their own with that different background in an attempt to skirt that. But I want you to just keep an eye out. And so for the community that's very loyal here, keep an eye out for this channel and make copyright reports on your own, because I don't generally look. I don't advocate, and so here is the channel. I can even give you the link. I'll put the link in the chat. Yeah, I think this might be it too. I think this might be it too. Some people said it's a divert tactic, because I've been noticing they've been coming really fast. These channels, they gain really They gain a lot of subscribers really quick. It's very suspicious. I believe this is a way to essentially push down my channel, but also similar channels to suppress them in the algorithm. It's happening. It is happening. If you Google, let's say, Scott Ritter's name, for example, you will find mostly these thieves. I think they're bots, honestly, but they may not be. But you'll find mostly these thieves. And what's happening is they're just ripping the videos, putting this background behind it, and publishing it as their own. So that is what's going on. Okay. There's Scott's big face there. Ominous looking face for an ominous situation. But I just wanted to show you that to just keep a lookout. Know that it's never me. I'm not giving this person permission, or these people. I don't know who they are, but they're not getting permission. But I think this is a nefarious tactic to essentially push down my videos and similar videos that are legit in the algorithm, and to confuse. I looked at the comments. I've studied some of it. You'll see people are quite confused. You'll see people think it's legitimate. Okay, so you see Scott, they'll comment on Scott, brilliant. People think this is a legitimate thing. A lot of you guys are spot on, but this isn't their video, and they didn't ask permission. Look, Danny can drag. Like, some people have criticism. My questions are too long. Well, this isn't even their video. Give me a break here. So, with all of that said, I wanted to show you that just because, look, I don't advocate for, I'm not a big copyright person. I'm not like, ooh, let's all keep the information to ourselves. But this is just 100% theft. I mean, it is. It's just, and it's not so much even if YouTube is part of my livelihood, which it is. It's also about the fact that it creates confusion, mistrust in the information itself. And I have a sneaking suspicion that this is not going to stop, that this is only going to get worse and worse. It's gotten worse and worse over the course of the last several weeks to months. Now I'm getting people emailing me all the time. Hey, your video's up here. Hey, your video's up there. So keep a lookout. You may see it in your recommendations. You may see it in your next video. If you do, hit that report button, and we need to mass report these kind of people. Because look, some people get mad at me, and I'll just put this out there, for, let's say, putting out an old clip. And I just want to say that, yeah, sometimes, especially since my trip to Vietnam, which destabilized my schedule and backed up videos, I didn't have the ability to get up all the old videos. And yeah, I still have a lot of old ones I'm sifting through. And well, okay, people may not like that. I'm hoping that the analysis is evergreen, which most of the time it is, mind you. But that's far different. You'll never see me. If I react to a video, but nothing of my work is anything but my own. And I'll never take from anyone else. Now, what these people are doing is literally they're going to my channel, they're ripping the video and republishing it with some clickbaity title, even more clickbaity than my titles, and getting rewarded. YouTube is rewarding them, because I know how the YouTube works. YouTube is the one that rewards. And I have a sneaking suspicion these channels are being deemed relatively new. That's my suspicion. And YouTube has a policy now of boosting newer channels. So it's very suspicious. It's highly suspect. And I just want to bring it to the attention of the community, because it's just one, and part and parcel of one of many ways in which we are suppressed. And that's why I also want to show you Rumble, okay? Because one day Rumble may be it for me, right? Because sorry about that. Wrong one. Here we go. Chat's going fast. Rumble. Go to rumble.com/Danny-Dhaiphong or /C/Danny-Dhaiphong. Follow me on Rumble as well, because one day that may be it for me. It may be where I go. You're going to want to be there. Follow me there. You can still watch me on YouTube, support me on YouTube. Of course, you can watch me on both channels, put one on mute. Doesn't really matter. The point here is that this is a scam. This is it's a real threat to just the work that we do here, the work that I do here, and the continued growth and spread of this message. Okay. So yes. There you go. Rumble's in the chat. All right. So I just wanted to show you all that. So I'm gonna give shout outs now. I'm not gonna be able to get to the China story. That would take another half hour. I gotta call it quits. But I do appreciate all of your enthusiasm, and I'll keep that story in the back burner. It's evergreen. It's about China's economic numbers. It's not an updated news story. So thank you, Joe WS, for this. It is true. I'm not here to like stress out or anything like that. I just need to let you all know that, yeah, this is happening, and some viewers may not yeah, many people may not know. So Joe, thank you so much for that. All right, so here we go. First, I'm going to get to the super chats, okay? The Iranian Putin. Love it. 5 memberships. How generous of you. Thank you so much. And to those 5, I hope that you're able to stick around afterward. But thanks so much for gifting those. And the Iranian Putin also asked for my input on the Pakistan retaliatory strikes. It would be greatly appreciated. Thank you, Danny. I hope that my input was helpful of some kind, because that was a harder topic for me. Can Hunter Biden at least get a what is 2023 best reveal of how politics and government actually works? Stephen Hayes said. I mean, it's not a lie. Hunter Biden shows how aristocratic so-called U.S. quote-unquote democracy really is. I mean, Hunter Biden, a coke snorting, absolute loser, being able to work up the ranks so far that he was given a top board member position at Burisma, at a Ukrainian energy company, just because his daddy helped stage a coup there and helped wrestle political control from that country. I mean, yeah, and plus much more. I mean, that's just what I tend to focus on. Stephen Hayes says again, thank you so much again. I bought 8 rolls of 2-ply EU and North American security agreements at the supermarket this afternoon, aka bag roll or toilet paper. I love it, Stephen. I love it. Thank you so much. That's a good one. That's really good. Iranian Putin says, much love, Danny. I love Pakistan, Iran, and India, but the world should understand this is their problem. 3 massive powers, 2 nuclear, maybe 3. Don't get involved. There's best for all countries, including Russia and China. Yeah, and what did China do? I didn't even mention this. China said it's going to be a mediator to this situation. That's all it wants to do. It's not going to do anything. Russia either. Neither of those countries have gotten involved in any kind of way, not even with strong statements. I think Mao Ning, the foreign ministry spokesperson of China, said that happened. She wasn't even paying attention to it. Why? Because this is their affairs. This has nothing to do with it. If these terrorists, of course, go after, as they did in 2022 and in other instances, if they go after Chinese infrastructure, then yeah, it becomes China's problem. But they still won't violate the sovereignty of, let's say, Pakistan because of it. They'll condemn those forces that did it. They'll work with Pakistan to resolve the issue, increase security. But Russia and China, as you know, Iranian Putin, also thanks for being a member. You know that they are more sophisticated than anything that we, I don't know if you're in the collective West, but I am. They navigate things in a sophisticated manner. And look, Iran, Pakistan, India, so many contradictions between them. That's one of the head spinning things, is that there are issues within all of these governments, but especially India and Pakistan. I mean, the internal contradictions, the ways in which the collective West, the United States in particular, are trying to dictate political affairs in these countries in ways that they can't really in Iran. But nonetheless, those two countries just have to deal with so much, and then they have their own issues between each other. The best case scenario is that all 3 of these countries end up in the final analysis as allies, that they become stronger and stronger friends rather than enemies. And that my hope is that through this process of regional disintegration of U.S. hegemony, not regional disintegration of the axis of resistance, but of U.S. hegemony, that yes, Iran and Pakistan can work out these issues around terrorism, and that the whole entire region can begin to work out issues that they've had historically as the US's influence begins to wane or accelerates in its waning. So, now I want to shout out. I don't see any new Patreon members or Substack members or PayPal or Buy Me a Coffee, so I won't shout anyone out from there. But I will say thank you so much to everyone who's a Patreon member who's watching, who is a YouTube member who's watching, who's a Substack paid member who's watching. Your support is very much appreciated, and you can support me in those platforms in the video description below. Those are the best places. That's how you give consistent contributions to this work so that I can grow and thrive, and also meet the headwinds of when the soft power war, so to speak, against there's the full repression, the full on war of YouTube channels like mine, and then there's a soft power of manipulating the algorithm and maybe even creating entire channels or boosting certain channels or whatnot that are literally stealing this work. So that's how you support this work and help it maintain itself in the long term. Okay. So I think that's all I've got tonight. All right. Let's see. Yeah, I think that's it. All right. Everything was appreciated. This was a great stream. Hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for everything. I keep rubbing my nose. No, believe me, I don't do what Zelensky does. I am not into that kind of stuff. It's very dry where I am. Let's just say it's just very dry. I've said this before. You can see that as an excuse if you want. That's fine. All right, everybody, hold on. Before I go, I want to just shout out to all who's in the chat. All right, Connie, thank you so much for being here, for moderating. Thanks, Desert Mantis, for moderating. Thank you, Iranian Putin again. Putin, thank you to all the new members who've been gifted new memberships. I see TWOFs and some others. Thanks, Joe WS again. Thanks, Abel Malcolm, for being a new member gifted. Big Basil says you do OnlyFans after. No, I'm not on the OnlyFans. Not on the OnlyFans. You wish. No OnlyFans for me. That's I got no judgment. Look, I got no judgment on that stuff. A lot of people have like these super views on OnlyFans. People, just like whatever. And I'm not pro. Look, I'm not pro sex worker, whatever, per se, right? I'm not pro. For people who have to do it, I have my utmost empathy for, because if they feel like they have no other options. But then I also look at it as a vice. It's a vice that it's an outgrowth of a parasitic economic system. And in a better world, that vice would be gone because people would be able to meet their needs without it. And we would live in a society where we didn't have to exploit this kind of sexual activity for money. That's just my view. That's the only place where I align really with so-called conservative mind views. It's not really that I'm conservative per se. It's just that I believe that we should be living in a world where this doesn't happen, because a lot of nefarious, horrible stuff. I mean, look at the Jeffrey Epstein situation. I mean, just the sex trafficking, all that stuff is just absolutely disgusting. And believe it when I say that all of these corporations that have been involved in the sex industry, they are heavily involved in that trafficking, and that there isn't an institution in Oregon that sells sex that isn't involved in it. So let's be honest, that is where I stand on that issue. So no, I'm not on OnlyFans, but there you have my viewpoint on sex work. All right, just looking at the chat before I head out of here. Oh, announcements. Oh God, announcements. Oh, I got another super chat. Thanks, Steven. Again. So, look, I was supposed to talk to Professor Richard Wolff, economist Richard Wolff, tomorrow. I will not be because we postponed, and I believe it's happening on Tuesday. I'm still waiting for the confirmation. Tuesday of next week. That would be the 23rd at 2 p.m. So be ready for that. And then I will have on Scott Ritter returning from Russia. He will be on my channel the 29th. So those will be the next two guests. Maybe I'll have another one. Maybe I won't, but just save the date. 23rd and 29th. I'll definitely be here. 23rd, 2 p.m. and the 29th, I believe, will be 8:30 or 9. I gotta solidify that time. And then I have one Patreon new member, Carrie McLean. Thank you so much, Carrie, for becoming a new Patreon member. All right, everyone, you know what to do. Okay. Thank you, Bryce. Appreciate it. Thank you for the new super chat. Everybody, of course, leave super chats, super stickers, leave comments, leave the like button. Look, we're going to defeat these MFers. They're not going to destroy this channel. That this channel is going to not just survive, it's going to thrive. We're going to grow. We're going to be able to sustain this work, and it's going to be a tool to end. It's going to be a tool to educate so we can end this state of affairs. We can end the warmongering. That's the point. So before you go, hit the like button if you have not yet. Hit the subscribe button, the notifications bell, leave a comment. All of that good stuff helps boost this in the algorithm. Of course, support that you can leave a super chat, a super thanks in the comments once this channel is gone. PML. Thank you so much for that. Thank you so much for the 5. I think that's pounds. Yes. Thank you so much. You do all that, comment, like, and then of course go to the video description, become a monthly or yearly. Yearly is on Patreon, on Substack, and not on YouTube actually. YouTube's always behind. So Patreon, Substack, you got annual options. You can become a YouTube member. You can become a one-time supporter on Buy Me a Coffee, and just some people just like to cycle that, or do PayPal, whatever. That's where you can support this work. That's where this work actually will be sustainable, because YouTube is, at this point, you all know, YouTube is temporary. It's a surprise that I have. Wow. William Ma just put a lot of thank you. Thank you. William, please email me these, and if you can, please report them. I think I've seen AEK. I haven't seen these others, Tech Life and all these. Just copyright strike. Let's do it, William. You can find my email in the video, not the video description, but the channel description. So go there, email me if you want those things as well. All right. So someone says Licha to Levan Gudadzi. Thank you. Yeah. All right. With that said, everybody, goodbye. Good night. See you all again. Might see you all again individually Sunday. All right. All right. Take care. Bye-bye.